Just hello to all. Thank you for attending. I'd like to welcome Gregg Mihran
Close enough.
KJ6ER for an unprecedented second presentation. Gregg is our 16th seminar presenter and was the very first presenter all those months ago.
Really?
We've had a number of very interesting and
Wow.
informative presentations, all of which have been recorded by our own Dave Kapler, N3DRK, and are available for viewing on YouTube at Yaesu Zoomers. I must say, without all of your interest and participation, this would not have been possible. So, without further ado, I present Gregg Mihran. Please mute your mic, and should you have a question, unmute and ask away. All yours, Gregg.
Okay. Okay, fellas, like I said, no religion and politics. We're just going to talk about geeky stuff now. Y'all ready for that? Switch
Yes,
your
sir.
brains to that? There you go. Okay, so let me first share. So I'll do that. There we go. And it always takes about 3 or 4 seconds. And I'll say 3, 2, 1. Can you see my slide? Well, everyone's muted,
Yes,
so they
we see.
can't tell me.
Yep, we got it.
You got it. Okay, good. That's right. You're all
Perfect
muted.
timing.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's funny. All right. So, as first of all, Bob, thanks so much. I really do appreciate the encore presentation opportunity. This is fun. As you're right. And so that was, I checked my records. It was January 7th. So a year and 2 months ago. You guys have been doing this for a while. And I just started presenting Zoom presentations about 3 months before that. So you were one of my first 20 or so. So great to be back. And I'm not going to repeat that presentation because you have it recorded. And Bob was nice enough to invite me back to kind of focus on everything since then. And let me tell you, over the last year and 2 months, a lot has happened with my antenna designs and a lot of other things. So I'm going to talk about those. All right, so let's get started. Just focus on some of the things that have changed. I still live here in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, a great state, beautiful state, golden state, expensive state, but hey, it's a beautiful state. Born back east, got my double E in Ohio. Retired. I was at some big companies and some startups, but we still have 5 grown kids around the country, and we now just added two grandchildren since I last talked to you. So we're now up to 6. Not that you remember that, but just to show you what was different. I still play very average bogey golf. I still love to hike and play music. And now I'm over 1,000 POTA activations. I don't think I was back in January of last year. And I primarily focus on sideband, but I love being outside. I do about probably 90% of my ham radio activity outside the house. I do have a home QTH station, but I love being outside. It's California after all. Beautiful 320 days out of the 365 a year. You can take notes, but everything I do, I put into these what I call always free PDFs. They are free. I don't believe in compiling my antenna designs into a book and having the ARR sell them and charge you for it. I believe it should be part of the, I guess I will say this, the socialist ham radio community. Basically, we create things and we share amongst all of us. I think that's the way it should be. That's the spirit of the hobby. So everything I do is for free, and all these are 15 to 20 page PDFs with lots of computer model output, statistics, parts list, links to where the recommended parts are, field reports, SWR sweeps, a whole bunch of graphics in there. So if you ever wanted to know anything about any one of these antennas, whether it's the Quarterwave, Halfwave, or even my new Moxon-inspired Marauder antenna, it's all for free. And these are the links. Now, you can take a screen cap of this, or better yet, just write down my email address. It's Greg, my first name, at KJ6ER, Kilo Juliet 6 Echo Romeo.net. And you'll get right to me. That's always good. And even better than that, if you want not only a list of all these PDFs, which you can just link, pull them on down out of the cloud, get on my Antenna Geeks email list. I send out a monthly newsletter. I think some of you are on it, where I feature a brand new antenna, or I provide an update to an existing antenna, or I talk about my next newsletter is going to focus on sporadic E. You know what's coming up, sporadic east season. So I'm going to focus on that and talk about my antennas as far as which ones work the best for 6 meters. So look for that. If you're interested, just send me an email, get on my Antenna Geeks email list. I'm always happy to add you. And also, every morning over my two Italian roast coffees, I answer emails overnight. I get a couple dozen overnight, and I always respond the next morning. So send me an email if you think of a question at 2 in the morning. Just write it down and send me an email. You don't have to call me. Please don't call me at 2 in the morning. One of the things that happened, I'm just going to again focus on the differences since last January. I was entered into the QST antenna competition, and the performer actually won an award. It won second place in the 80 through 10 meter category. And I was amazed to see I was the only US based ham that won in that category. That really surprised me. But I was very honored by that. That was quite honestly a surprise. I did not expect it. And I did cover the performer. I was here. I was last time I was here, Bob. But I'll talk a little bit about it today. And on top of that, in the June or in the September QST issue, as part of that award, I got to have a 5-page article on the performer in QST magazine, so I can take that off my checklist, my bucket list, because I wanted to always put an article in QST, and so that was one of the benefits of winning the award. So I was really proud of that, and again, being very honored. And then I didn't even know about this, but in every QST, you can vote on your favorite article in the magazine, and lo and behold, it's called the Cover Plaque Award, that performer article in QST about the award-winning antenna. Whoops, someone unmuted. There you go. We heard lots of echoes there. I won the Cover Plaque Award for that article. So again, I was very honored and very pleased, and something I'm very proud of. Giving to the hobby is what I love to do, and getting this kind of recognition make me feel happy. So I was really happy to see that. For those of you that may not have seen my last presentation, I am going to emphasize some things which I really believe are important because I'm an engineer. And so I think about things like design principles. I was taught that by Bill Hewlett when I first started Hewlett Packard here in Silicon Valley many years ago, is to have design principles and to make sure they're measurable. Because if you can't measure your objective or your principle, then how do you know you achieved it? So first and foremost, highly efficient and effective, focusing on performance. And how do I measure performance? Radiation efficiency. Most commercial antenna manufacturers do not talk about radiation efficiency. Basically, if I apply 100 watts to that antenna at the feed point, how much of that 100 watts will be radiated by the antenna? You assume it's 100%. It's rarely 100%. It's typically more like 40, 45%. You lose half of your power inside the components of the antenna, or more importantly, into the ground the antenna is sitting on. So I've devised ways in the antenna design, especially with the performer, to alleviate that and achieve at least 90%. So if you put in 100 watts, you'll radiate 90 watts. You put in 10 watts QRP, you'll radiate 9 watts. Performance, that's my top priority. Number two, because these are all portable antennas, which originally started out portable, but I'm finding a lot of people use them at their QTH or especially in their HOAs. Fast and simple deployment. Elegance. I call that elegance. If your design is simple, not esoteric, but simple enough to be effective and efficient, then that's elegant. And I love that word. And I want to make sure that fast and simple deployment takes 5 minutes or less. I've been on activations with people with complicated antennas. It takes them 25 minutes to set up. I get mine set up, all of my antennas set up in 3 minutes or so, because I've done them so many times. And by the time they're done setting up, I've already made 30 some odd contacts. So I believe in fast and simple deployment, set up and take down, because sometimes you have to leave in a hurry. And thirdly, because again, these are portable, easy to pack in your backpack, because I love to hike into the mountains if I have to. Well, we call them mountains in California. They're really big hills. Or at a picnic table, hiking over from the car to the picnic table. So they need to be easy to pack and transport. I call that convenience, and they have to be lightweight, 5 pounds or less. Most of them are much less than that. And one of the things, and I just mentioned this, I did not realize this when I first started doing this a couple of years ago. I designed the Performer back in 2020 for myself. And then I started using it at POTA activations. And so many hunters said, "How come you sound so loud? What's the difference? What are you doing? How much power are you running? You're the only signal on the band I can hear." Well, that's because I've got radiation efficiency of 90%. So I'm like, compared to guys who are running ground mounted quarter wave verticals at the time, I had double, and they, with efficiency of 45%, I was double the output at around 90 watts, 90%. So that's why I sounded louder. So a lot of HOA guys started picking up on this, and they, not all the times, especially they're in Florida, they can't leave their antenna up. So they want to have a nice dinner with the family, go out after dinner, set up the antenna, have fun on the radio for 3 hours, and take it down. So again, highly efficient and effective performance, fast and simple deployment, elegance, and pack and transport convenience. Okay, makes sense. So when I think about antennas, and since I spoke to you a year ago, January, I've thought of quite a few new antennas, and I'm going to show you some of the future ones as well. I still only think about, because I am a geek, I'm a self-proclaimed geek. About 5% of my time, I do think about the math and physics, because that's important to me, because I want to understand it, but I don't need to convey it, right? I just want to make sure that the underlying science makes sense to me. I spend most of my time modeling, 15% of my time compared to the theory, because I'm a visual thinker and I love to think about new antennas, sometimes in the middle of the night, and then put them in my modeling program, see if the design even makes sense, and then try to bring it to reality. And it generates such beautiful 3D radiation graphs, I just couldn't resist using it. So I started using this about 5 years ago when I first designed the Performer. And that's what helped me come up with the Performer. But the bulk of my time, when I think about a new antenna, we live on postage stamps here in Silicon Valley, and this is my postage stamp. It's about a quarter acre. Nothing like all you guys who live on acres out there. But this is Silicon Valley, after all, with lots of sun, so we have solar panels. This is my antenna proving ground right here in the backyard. That's where I take the design, the model, deploy it in the backyard, and then spend hours and hours. And let me tell you, it's hours and hours of tweaking it, because what's in the virtual world does not always relate to what's in the real world. And even going from here to POTA Park, there are some differences. So I spent a lot of time not only in my backyard antenna proving ground, but then I do some real world evaluation in POTA parks. And that's what I love most about POTAs. I love taking out new antennas and talking to hunters. I do a lot of A/B testing between antennas, between different prototypes antennas. I test new antennas as well. And I say, which one sounds better, louder, and I gain a lot of data that way. And it helps me really deliver a field tested antenna. And that's what I really love about doing POTA. So let's talk about these antennas. Now, I love, because I'm an engineer, I'm a geek, an antenna geek. I love building antennas, right? I believe in homebrew. That's a big part of our hobby. Quite frankly, antennas is probably our last real home brewing frontier, because they package radios in these beautiful boxes now, and in Japan, China, and other places in the US as well. And they're just fantastic. My dad built his own transmitter and his own receiver back in the 1930s and 40s, but we don't have to do that anymore unless we really want to. And there's some cool little kits out there, but for the most part, antennas is our last home brewing frontier. So I'm trying to encourage, my missions, I'm trying to encourage the every ham, I call them, the every ham, to go out, think about the fact that they can build their own antenna and put it on the air and feel really good about it. That's really important. So when I think about an antenna design, and again, now this is part of the elegance, I want to keep it simple. I want it to include parts that you probably already have on hand in your ham radio stuff box. So with that in mind, all of my antennas include telescopic whips. Now, they don't allow wires and trees in California parks. So I've never really put a wire in a tree, but that's fine because I want to keep it relatively portable and versatile. So I just use telescoping whips, and I use mirror mounts. People call them trucker mounts or CP mounts, whatever. They're just simple 3/8 by 24 coupler on top with an SO239 underneath. And every single one of my antennas includes an RF choke. And that's another rule I want to implore upon you. ABC, always be choking. 99% of the time, you do not want your coax shield to be part of the antenna system unless you've designed it that way. I don't care for doing that at all. So I want to choke off the coax shield from the antenna system so you don't get common mode currents and RFI down the line. So always use a choke. So those are my three fundamental tinker toys in terms of the radiator. Now, as far as support, I love lightweight tripods, and there's a lot of those on Amazon. Really lightweight, typically aluminum, powder coated black. I love those. Or one of the things I've been doing more recently is I just get some furniture grade PVC tube, or it could be irrigation mode. Doesn't make any difference. Put a coupler on top and a spike on the bottom, and use that as my support. The advantage of that is in some cases, especially if you got some elevated short radials for 6 meters and 10 meters, they can interfere with your aluminum tripod. This doesn't allow any interference because this is non-conductive, obviously, it's PVC. But either case, they both work. I use them both. It doesn't make any difference. Depends on what your preference is. So tripods are PVC tube spikes. And then, of course, you're going to need, with the exception of the Quarterwave, you're going to need some sort of unun or transformer or balun, depending on your antenna. Unun and transformer, same thing. So is the balun. But 4-to-1 unun. Unun meaning unbalanced antennas versus balun meaning balanced antennas like a dipole. So 4-to-1 unun, 4-to-1 balun, 9-to-1 for certain long wire antennas or full wave antennas. I've got one that uses that. Then for the end fed or the offsetter fed, or really for the end fed, you got the 49-to-1, or I love this highly efficient 56-to-1 for my antennas. Again, ununs and balance, with the exception of the Quarterwave, are part of the antenna system. And then I love silicon coated wire, and my favorite colors are orange and yellow, high visibility. And so I typically use 18 gauge silicon coated wire, tangle free. They work really well in the field in particular. And there are parts of the antenna where I want non-conductive elements to separate some of the conducting parts of the antenna, which I'll show you, especially in the new Marauder antenna. I use a weed whacker line, non-conductive. It's nylon, I believe. You can use whatever you want, but I use non-conductive nylon weed whacker line. It works really well for that. How do I hook everything together? I love Muller clips, however you want to pronounce it. A lot of people call them battery terminal clips. They work really, really well to attach wires to it, or even to attach your nylon line to it, as you'll see. And I've discovered I started off using bullet connectors or spade connectors, and I got now so into, I call them Wago connectors, not Wagyu like the beef, or Wago. Germans pronounce it Vago because I think it's a German company. Regardless, I love these Wago the connectors. They work so well. And you could put stripped wire inside each end of those, and they just clip down and they provide this really strong connection. But my preference is wire ferrules. You just pop those on the end and crimp them, and then they work incredibly well, and they're very strong and tight. Was there a question there, or was that just someone clearing their throat? I'll assume it's just a throat. Okay, so those are my tinker toys. All of my antennas, I can't think of any exception, use all of these or a subset of these components. So these are stuff you probably already have on hand. And if you don't have these Vagos and wire ferrules and you like to build antennas, strong recommendation. I think this is the way to go. I've compared them to my bullet connectors and wire and my spade connectors, and they work so, so well. Okay, so let's talk about this now antenna family. And what I've found that I've been doing, and I really love doing this, is I go into the QSD or the ARRL antennas manual that goes back to the 1930s, and I find these classic antenna designs. And some of these classic antenna designs have been forgotten about. And people don't even talk or use them anymore for portable antennas. And so I try to bring them forward into the current day using those simple tinker toy parts and help people build their own portable version of that antenna. So you'll find that a lot of my antennas, I don't invent the antenna, but I create a new and fresh implementation of the antenna in the current portable world of ham radio. And my friends, we all know the solar cycle is waning, so you've got to be more productive and be more precise about building your antennas because you want to get on the air and you're going to be competing for everybody else in the same band because all of a sudden we're going to lose 10, 12, 15, and good bit of 17 will all be stuck on 20, 30, 40, and 80 meters. So think about that as we go forward over the next couple, 3 years. But I started out, Quarterwave antenna was the performer. As I mentioned, I built this for myself back in 2020. People said, wow, you sound great. How do I build my version of the, I didn't call it the performer then, but it became the performer. And so that's when I started creating these little emails about how to build your own. Then it turned into a PDF, and it started off being a 5-page PDF. Now it's about a 17-page PDF with a whole bunch of everything as a computer model all the way out to the SWR sweeps in the field. So that's what I started with, the performer, 40 through 6 meters. And as far as I know, there's about 50,000 of these based on just my downloads alone. Off of my bit.ly link, about 50,000 of these have been downloaded over the last 5 years. Pretty amazing to me, all over the world. About 2/3 in North and South America, the rest of it, the other third everywhere else in the world, Europe, Russia, Asia, wherever. Then I think I talked about, because this was available in January of 2025, the Dominator. I had so much fun with a quarter wave, I wanted to explore a half wave. And I thought, I've always been fascinated by vertical half waves, and Chameleon was coming out with his 25-foot whip. So I came up with a design called the Dominator. It's an end-fed half wave using a 25-foot telescoping whip for a very low angle of radiation. This is about 24 degrees off the horizon. This is about 18 degrees. And because it's a 25-foot whip and it's end-fed, you get 17 through 10 meters. Amazing DX potential, and we'll talk about that. But that was another one that I introduced around the same time. And then, people said, I really want 20 meters off of my 25-foot telescoping whip, and I know it's not quite long enough. You need about 32 feet, like that alpha antenna 34-footer would work, but most people don't want to buy that. I know I don't. I don't want to guy it. So I came up with the Challenger. And the Challenger was one I introduced right around the time I think I talked to you guys last. It's an off-center fed. This is end-fed, where you have about roughly 95% radiator and 5% counterpoise, roughly. The Challenger, off-center fed, is about 80% radiator and about 10 to 20% counterpoise. And the beauty of these half-wave antennas, when you have an elevated quarter wave, it has to be elevated because your radials and your feed point carry so much current. That's the current maxima here at the feed point. So much current, you don't want them to couple to the ground. That's where you lose a lot of your radiation efficiency. The nice thing about an end-fed half wave or even an offset half wave, you have far less current at that point in the radiator, so you can have it lower to the ground. I typically like to keep my quarter wave up about 5 feet. I keep these up about 1 to 2 feet, depending on where I am. And then you can just let the counterpoise droop along the ground and onto the ground because there's hardly any current at that point in the half wave antenna line versus in a quarter wave antenna, there is tremendous current, especially in the first 2/3 of the radials. That's why you elevate radials on a quarter wave antenna, and you don't have to do it on a half wave antenna. And then as I was really having all this amazing success getting DX on my Dominator, and in particular, I said, I'm going to have some more fun. And so I created a Dominator parasitic array. And I have a PDF dedicated to that, and you get close to 4 dBi. dBi, I meaning isotropic point antenna. It's a theoretical antenna, but whenever you talk about gain, you have to make sure it's relative to something else. In this case, it's a dBi relative to an isotropic point antenna. So you get 4 dBi gain when you put a parasitic director in front of your Dominator. And I've used this from California here in the Bay Area to work other parks in Europe, park to park, over the pole with a 5.5 to 5.7 signal report when conditions permit. It's amazing. The gain on this thing, and it also, when you put a parasitic director there, it drops the angle of radiation about another degree to 17 degrees off the horizon. And we'll talk about that more in a second. So that's worked really well. And that worked so well, I did the same thing for the Challenger. So you can build a Dominator parasitic array or you can have your Challenger and add another director in front of your Challenger. You won't get the 4 dBi gain because it's a not an end-fed full, almost a full half wave. It's an off-center fed half wave, but you get a couple of dBi gain, and you also lower your radiation angle. So that's another good antenna to consider. As, again, especially as the solar cycle is waning, you're going to either need a amplifier in the field, which I don't recommend, or you get a gain antenna. And that's why these are going to be really popular over the next 4 years. All right, so once I did those with those antennas, I did the same thing for the Performer, and I'll talk about that both as a phased array and a parasitic array for more gain on the Performer. And I'll show you some of those models in a minute.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
So I put one in the chat, but I have two. So one is, I understand the transmit efficiency. What about receive efficiency? And then the other question is, when you're in a park, how do the trees in a park affect the radiation patterns and radiation in general compared to, say, throwing a wire up higher in a tree?
Yeah, those are great questions, Bruce. And I wish I had definitive answers, but I'll answer them the best I can. In general, whenever I talk about radiation efficiency is that of the antenna structure itself, right? So it's the components used in the antenna, the height above ground, all the elements of the antenna system itself. What I always say, there's always a caveat. I say, of course, it's very dependent upon the ground or soil conditions, because I've got very fertile soil here in Silicon Valley. It used to be all orchards. So it's very fertile. So it's got a good permeability, good conductivity. It's really good soil. But I've been up in the hills or mountains, as you say, with much poorer soil, where you don't get the same kind of radiation efficiency that you would like to have. So it's very dependent on those. And you mentioned the other thing it's dependent upon, near field surroundings. Now, the nice thing about vegetation for HF is that they don't absorb at HF frequencies like they do at VHF and especially UHF frequencies. In other words, if you're going to put a wire in a tree for an HF antenna, it's probably okay. You'll lose very, very little in the vegetation or the tree itself. But if you're going to put a VHF or UHF antenna in a tree, you're going to lose potentially up to half your radiated power because of that structure, in this case, the tree. So it's very frequency dependent. It's also very ground dependent as well. But in the end, the structure itself is at least 90% efficient. And that's the way I spec them, because I can't spec all the different ground conditions and near field surroundings. As far as receiver sensitivity, I've never really researched that to the point where I've modeled it. I've only focused on the transmitted side. That's a good question, Bruce. My guess is that it won't have a huge impact on it. I think it will have a benefit in that if the antenna itself has been built to radiate efficiently, you probably have a good chance of also receiving efficiently. I know I can hear very weak signals on all of these antennas, and these are all rated at 90% or better. But I can't tell you definitively because I haven't measured it if that's improved the radiation, the receive sensitivity as well.
I delayed a trip to a friend's cabin today so I could listen to you, Greg.
Well, I hope I meet your expectations.
Well, and he's got a couple of acres up on the flanks of Mount St. Helens.
Oh,
and and there's 100-foot trees all around.
Right.
And so he's carved a spot inside these trees. And
good.
I was going to bring my 7100 up there and
good
throw a wire in a tree, but I'm wondering how one of these verticals would work in that environment. You certainly have, we have very wet ground, right? So
yeah,
the ground is wet all winter.
Yeah, I get it.
But the trees are huge.
The trees are huge. And like I said, it is frequency dependent. HF isn't absorbed into vegetation like VHF and UHF is. However, the other reason, in fact, you brought it up right there. One of the reasons I love to have a portable support structure like a tripod or the PVC tube spike is I can move myself into a clearing to assure that I am away from rocks, any changes in the sloping environment, or in particular, a heavy, dense covering of trees. I'm not saying a heavy, dense covering of trees won't help you, but it certainly won't necessarily hurt you if you've got your antenna out in the clear. And that's why I like to do that as well. I just keep them away from things as much as I can, including people, if that's possible. But that's a good question, Bruce. Most people don't ask that, but that's the reason that I like to keep them portable, so I don't have to use wires and trees. I can't anyway here in California, and I still probably wouldn't if I was elsewhere.
One last quick one.
Sure.
You could probably answer quickly.
Yeah.
You're saying that like your full way or your halfway is, a couple feet off the ground is good.
Yep.
What if you push them higher? Do they work as well or better?
Yes.
Or...
Yeah. You lower your. Oh, there's the echo again. Yeah, it lowers the takeoff angle a little bit, Bruce. The Dominator is about 18 degrees takeoff. The Challenger is about 21 degrees. When you raise those up, you can drop the takeoff about a degree or two. And that degree or two could make a difference if you're trying to get that DX station or if you're in a pileup, again, for long distance communications. If you're playing POTA and you want to do regional and continental communications, keep in mind, especially the Dominator, like when I use it here in California, I skip over 2/3 of the country. I'm here on the far west coast and I work the entire eastern seaboard and I get 5.7s to 5.9s from Florida up to Maine. Even go in as far as maybe Pennsylvania, Ohio, but then everything left of that, so to speak, I skip over. And that's what a low angle of radiation does. So when you think about what your objective is when you put an antenna out there, determine, do I want to make DX contacts? Do I want to go continental, regional? It makes a big difference, not only in the type of antenna you use or how high you put that antenna. So Bruce, to answer your question, as you raise it up, you will lower that that takeoff angle, which increases your skip zone. It increases your skip zone. And those are the states or the provinces that you skip over. Make sense?
It does. I was thinking I have a 30-foot fiberglass pole.
Mm.
And I was, putting one of your antennas on top of that.
I love it. You mean the feed point at the top?
Yeah.
Woo! I love it. If you do that, send me a picture and let me know how it works out.
I'll change my background. You can see a picture of it. I won't.
Okay.
I won't
just so you know, as you move again further away from the ground as well, that also affects the impedance. So you're probably going to have to retune what you tune the antenna as near the ground. Let's say 2, 3, 4, 5 feet. It's going to be different the higher up you go, especially at 30 feet. You're going to be in almost free space, if you want to call it that, assuming you're using a non-conducting fiberglass pole. Okay.
Very good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Oh yeah, you bet. And by all means, if there's any questions, I love interacting. If you have any questions, just feel free to yell at me and talk about it. All right, so I started with these. I started with the Quarterwaves. Oh yeah, I was going to say the other Quarterwave that I put together after I was doing the arrays, I got a lot of people, especially in HOAs, asking for two things. Guys saying, I like to work my local club and some of the surrounding areas, or I'm doing some emergency communications, I'm volunteering my time, or I want a lower profile antenna, visibility profile antenna for my HOA. Can you give me an NVIS version of the Performer antenna, near vertical incident skywave? And that just means it's got to have a very high takeoff angle. The Performer has about 24 degrees. The Performer NVIS has about 86 degrees. And we'll talk about that one as well. So I decided, okay, why not? I designed the Performer NVIS where you don't have to change much in the antenna. You just add one wire and you can make it an NVIS antenna. And just because it's NVIS, high angle radiation, doesn't mean you can't get DX on it. And I'll talk about that later when I talk about that antenna. Okay, so Quarterwave, Halfwave, what's next? Well, one more Halfwave. That's the newest one that I put out. I introduced it in, what month is this? In February. And this is my concept of taking classic antenna designs and bringing them up to the future or the current time and making sure that I have. All right, so as I was saying before the real world interrupted, so I've always been fascinated by a lot of these classic antennas that I used to read about, but they're really, if you ever read the antenna manual, I love that thing. But it's a lot of these articles that were written back in the 50s, 60s, even 70s and 80s, and they tend to get pretty complicated. And a lot of people, especially newer hams, are kind of put off by the complexity. So I try to simplify these as much as possible and create a portable version of them, which is what I was talking about. So I was always fascinated by the Moxon antenna, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And so I created the a 20 through 6 meter Marauder. Yeah, I always come up with names because I like to name my kids. I like to name my antennas. It's a lot of fun that way. It's called a Marauder. It uses two telescoping whips, and you'll see it has a radiator and a parasitic reflector behind it. And this has become very, very popular, especially for folks that are looking for both DX and for regional and continental communications. It works incredibly well. Okay, so quarter wave, half wave, and then I started in the future later on this year. That's why you want to get on my Antenna Geeks list. I'm introducing full wave antennas. Full wave. The first one I'm going to introduce probably in a couple months is the thruster triangular loop, which basically is a performer and one elevation pole, but it's all shaped. This whole whip and these two wires form a triangular loop. And let me tell you, it works incredibly well. I've already used it at POTA. That's going to be the thruster triangular loop. There'll also be a square version of it. I'll call it the thruster square loop. You'll be seeing that down the road this year. And this is my newest one that I've been playing with at POTA, and it's far exceeded my expectations. For those of you that know classic antennas, there's something called a half square antenna, where basically it's a full wave antenna with an open bottom, and it uses roughly a quarter wave here, a half wave there, and about a quarter wave there, and you get incredible 3 to 4 dB gain on all the bands. And you also get a relatively low takeoff angle. And I've used this over the last 3 weeks at POTA activations, again, testing it out before I share it as an antenna design. And it's working really, really well. So that's another one coming out. And then I've already tested this. You can take this triangular loop and put a parasitic reflector behind it, and you can almost double the gain. It's really, really amazing. So this is basically the family as it looks right now. There's some other ones in my head that I'm playing around with, but right now it's the quarter wave, half wave, and full wave antennas that are in the family. Any questions up to this point other than what Bruce asked a moment ago? Because now I want to get into each of these antennas because I think that's what we want to talk about. And Bob, I'm good, you said, until for like another whenever? Bob says, who cares? Whatever. Okay. I love it. I love to talk about this stuff, but I'll try to, keep it succinct as possible. All right. So when you look at a lot of antennas, and I'm a geek, and I like to talk about a lot of antennas, and I like to compare them, it's hard to do that, right? When you look at my last diagram, you can see all these antennas. And so I thought, all right, well, what if I start overlaying one antenna over another on a typical computer model polar coordinate chart? Well, you start doing that, it gets very complicated and very messy. So again, being a visual thinker, I said, all right, I've seen occasionally what they call Cartesian coordinates being used. Cartesian coordinates, if you remember from your junior high school math class, it's basically X and a Y axis. That's all it means, Cartesian coordinates. Here's your y-axis, and here's your x-axis, okay? So now let's talk about how this relates to antennas. Well, look at the y-axis, and let's kind of use dBi, both positive and negative dBi as our metric on the y-axis. And then for the x-axis along the bottom, let's show elevation angles off the horizon in 5-degree increments. Pretty straightforward. Y-axis is gain. X-axis is elevation angle off the ground. Okay. Now, to make it even more interesting and to kind of make it more relatable to hams, I took the elevation angles off the horizon and I put them into categories. So when you've got radiation energy between, let's say, 5 to 15 degrees, you've got tremendous global DX potential. Again, this is all dependent upon your ionosphere. But assuming the conditions are good, 5 to 10 degrees radiated energy off that horizon, you get good potential DX contacts. 20 to 30, I would call that continental. That's like being in North America, working in Canada, working all over the US, even Mexico. That really works well when you're 20 to 30 degrees off the horizon. That's a very popular POTA target. Even more so, regional. Regional, let's say that's roughly 35 to 55 degrees off the horizon. You can work a couple states over. You can work sometimes even the next state over, but a couple of states over. You don't skip over, like I was telling you with my low angle antennas, like the Dominator and the Challenger. You can really skip over a lot of the country. With the POTA quarter wave, the Performer quarter wave, with about a 24 degree, it also has energy up here. So you can work good regional contacts as well. That's why it's worked so well for parks on the air. And then, of course, anything from 60 degrees on up to 90 degrees off the horizon, straight up as 90. We call that NVIS, Near Vertical Incident Skywave, which we'll talk more about, or basically getting inside the skip zone. In other words, if you have a high angle, anything, let's say over 60 degrees, a high angle radiation component of your antenna, you could potentially go straight up. If it's 30 meters and below, you come straight down at the same angle. If it's above 30, like let's say 20 meters to 6 meters, you still have high angle radiation, but it's refracted at a bigger angle, but you can still get inside the skip zone. And that's what makes the Performer NVIS antenna so interesting, which I'll show you when we get there. Okay. Now, here's an example. I talked about the Challenger parasitic array on the previous slide. This is what it looks like on polar coordinates, right? And so you can see it has about a, let's see, that is about a 19-degree takeoff angle. Right around here is the peak radiation. You can see, there you go. There's the radiation as it moves around the elevation off the ground. And, you know, that's what we like to see when we look at or we model a new antenna. But when you try to overlay a lot of these on top of each other, it gets pretty crowded. But all of a sudden, you take this exact same chart and put it on Cartesian coordinates, and it starts looking like this. And we'll look at this in just a moment. But for example, on this chart, I put a triangle where the peak radiation angle is. In this case, it is around 19 degrees on the Challenger parasitic array, about 1.2 dBi. That's isotropic relative to isotropic, as well as I show where the extremes are, minus 4.4 dBi at about 5 degrees, all the way up to minus 3.9 dB around 45 degrees. So you can see the the Challenger parasitic array peaks around continental, but it has all this positive dBi coverage down into the global DX antenna, continental, and you never really get into the regional NVIS. So that's why I created this chart. So you can very quickly see how an antenna not only is compared to others, which I'll show you in a second, but also where it's optimized for, in this case, global DX and continental. Makes sense? This chart makes sense? All right, let's take a look at these. All right, let's start with the Performer. And the Performer, those of you that, I'm assuming most of you have heard about the Performer, or you may have built one. You know that you can have your elevated radials. This is the quarter wave antenna, and that's what I'm trying. These are all the single element designs here. This is the quarter wave antenna that is elevated to ensure you've got 90% radiation efficiency. You can see that it peaks around 24 degrees at about minus 0.7 dBi, and it's a 90% efficient. Okay, so that's what all this nomenclature over here means. Let's go to the next one. This is the Challenger. All right, this is the Challenger off-center fed half-wave using a 4-to-1 unun or transformer. All right, it's same term, interchangeable. Now you drop your 24-degree takeoff to 21 degrees. You increase your power from minus 0.7 dBi to minus 0.3 dBi at the peak, and it's 94% efficient because it's just the way the antenna is designed. It's very, very efficient using the 4-to-1 unun that I talk about in the PDF. So you can already begin to see you're getting a little bit stronger continental and a little bit more into the global DX. You see how that works? That's why I like comparing them on a Cartesian chart like this. Okay, Bob's shaking his head. Yes, he gets it. Good job, Bob. All right, let's keep going. What about the Dominator? Look what happens when you do the Dominator. The Dominator, you drop down to 18 degrees, take off on the horizon, and you get a plus zero point 0.6 dBi at its peak radiation angle, and it's about 91% efficient. So here's the Performer Quarterwave with the radials at opposite each other, 180 degrees apart. This is the Challenger off-center fed half-wave and the Dominator end-fed half-wave. You can see when Greg wants to go out and go after DX, I take out my Dominator. When I'm just wanting to work the bulk of the US and Canada, I take out my Performer. Somewhere in between is the Challenger to kind of fill in the gap between the two. The Performer is the most installed KJ6ER antenna, but the Challenger is rapidly becoming one of the most installed antennas relative to the Performer because it's so easy to deploy. You don't need to elevate two radials. You just lay your one counterpoise on the ground from the feed point up about a foot or two.
Hey,
And then,
Greg.
of course, there's your Dominator. Yes, sir. Yes, Bruce. Who else would it be? It's got to be Bruce.
Going back to the reference to an isotropic antenna. I mean, I know of those. They were on the tests,
Yeah, I know.
but I'm trying to relate that to some other real world antenna, like maybe a dipole or something,
So okay, related to this, a dipole is roughly about, I'll just round it off to about 2 dBi. So a
Plus
dipole is bidirectional, where these are omnidirectional, all right? There's a difference. Bidirectional, about plus 2 dBi, if that helps. So it depends on your dipole, how high off the ground. Obviously, for dipole, you got to have, for optimal performance, a half wavelength above the ground based on your operating frequency. And if you are, and you're made out of good components and you've got a good one-to-one balun at the feed point, you can get somewhere between 1 to 2 dBi of gain bidirectional in the dipole, if that helps, Bruce.
it does. And then obviously the other very common portable antenna now is the end-fed half wave or
Yep.
long wire. And those tend to be thrown in a tree, so they're somewhat vertical, right? They have vertical
Yep.
components to them.
Yep.
I understand that a vertical antenna like these every antenna is a compromise, right?
Sure.
And so, here you have less overall gain, but you're getting far more convenience and flexibility in terms of setup and all of that.
Yep.
And so what prompted me to ask the question was, oh, we got negative gain. Oh my gosh. But it's definitely more complicated than that. That's why
Yeah, so be careful. You don't want to say negative gain. It's gain relative to an isotropic, right, antenna. So you still get gain, nice gain, and it's extremely effective. It works extremely well. It's highly efficient, but relative to a theoretical point, which doesn't exist, it's a point antenna.
Right.
The gain is negative relative to that. So
Okay.
don't say negative gain, but say it's negative relative to an isotropic antenna.
And because an isotropic is a point, it's by definition omnidirectional.
Omnidirectional, and it's 100% efficient. It doesn't exist.
Okay.
It's theoretical. It does not exist. You'll never build an isotropic antenna. But in the virtual world, you can compare things to it, and that's what you have to compare. When you talk about gain of an antenna, you have to compare it to something.
Sure.
You can't just say, oh, it's 3 dB. No, you have to say it's 3 dBi or it's minus 3 dBi or whatever, because it helps people understand it. Now, when you talk front to back, you're comparing forward gain versus radiation out the back. That is dB. So, for example, the Performer may be minus 0.7 dBi at 24 degrees. But if you put your radials, and I'll show that next, 90 degrees apart from 180, you get about a 3 dB front to back. 3 dB, not but 3 dB front to back, the gain between the span of the radials versus behind the two radials. And let's show that one next. Those are all good questions, Bruce. Keep them coming. So you can see this dark green line is the Performer now. The light green was the 180-degree radial, but look what happens when you put your two radials at 90 degrees. And I think Based on the emails I get, it's probably 50-50. I'd say half the performer users put them at 90 degrees because they want to work like in California or Oregon or any coastal state. You want to point inside the US. So you put your radials 90 degrees, kind of the radial span pointed inside the US. Look what happens. You go from minus zero point 0.7 dBi omnidirectional to plus 3 dBi between the span of the radials at 24 degrees, about the same takeoff angle, but it's unidirectional because there's front to back. The span of the radials gives you that zero point 0.3 positive dBi gain versus with a 3 dB front to back behind you. And that's why I show that there, 3 dB front to back. Make sense? Okay. Now let's keep going. Let's talk about the NVIS antenna, the Performer NVIS antenna. This came to be because I had so many emails requesting it for a variety of reasons, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. If I can come up with a NVIS antenna, so if you already have the Performer, you can just make a simple little tweak to it and make it an NVIS antenna, and I'll show you how I did that. But look what happens with the Performer NVIS. The Performer NVIS plus 2.4 dBi, because it uses the ground as a reflector, and I'll show you that in a moment, at 86 degrees takeoff. 86 degrees takeoff, and it's omnidirectional like the Performer. So if you've got your Performer, let's say at 90-degree radials, and you can work all the way out to about, with a positive dBi up to about 30 degrees and just very little minus dBi up to about 40 degrees. You can then quickly convert that to a Performer NVIS and get all this extra gain, high angle radiation on all the bands 40 through 6 meters. And look at what you can get, 2.4 dBi gain. That's huge. And I'll show you why that's so cool when I show you the antenna. All right.
So,
yeah.
So
Go ahead.
Triggers another one. One of the problems I've had while camping.
Yes.
I like to camp on the Oregon coast.
Yep.
And between my house in Portland and the Oregon coast is the Coast Range.
Got it.
And
yes, I know where you're going with this.
Yep. I've struggled to reach back to my home territory to talk to my friends here while I'm camping on the coast. So then the question is, with an NVIS antenna, what kind of a cone do you get? How broad is that downward radiation cone? Would it be broad enough to bridge the Coast Range, for example?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I know guys who have used this in what they call big city lots, where they have a lot of buildings around them and they can't get out with a vertical antenna. I have guys that have been stuck in valleys and can't get over the sides of the valley with their typical quarter wave or definitely half wave antenna. So I suggested, why don't you make this one modification to the Performer and turn it into an NVIS antenna? And while the peak radiation is at 86 degrees, look at this radiation, positive dBi radiation, all the way down to about 52 degrees. And even down here, you match the Performer with its radials 90 degrees, around 40 to 45 degrees. This takeoff, this energy at this elevation angle of the antenna will get you over those mountains. You will notice a big difference. And I've had so many people write me and say, wow, what a difference. I'm able now to work out of this valley, or I can work out of my city lot. Or sometimes these guys go in these parking lots in the city and they want to get over the buildings, which is, some of these POTA parks are in downtown areas. So this is an alternative and something for you to consider, Bruce. And I'll show you that antenna when we get there. Okay. That's why I designed it, because and that's why I keep designing antennas. I get these emails, people saying, well, here's my predicament. Here's my challenge. What can I do? What do you recommend? And so I think of, okay, let's think about tweaking the design to help address that particular situation. The NVIS antenna, I call it NVIS. It's a fun antenna. It's a lot of fun. And I've worked Japan on it from California. So just because it's high angle radiation doesn't mean you can't, if the conditions are right, you can't even get DX on it. You can. It's pretty cool. I just love the ionosphere. It changes every day. How high it is versus low it is affects your propagation distance. But there's a lot of fun things you can do with it when it's working. Unlike recently, bands have been pretty bad. But as we get further and further into this waning solar cycle, you're going to have to get more creative and come up with some different antennas to kind of make the contacts you're making today. All right. I talked about what's coming. I love full wave. I love the concept of full wave antennas because I already have quarter wave and half wave. Let's go to a full wave. This thruster triangular loop. I want you to look at this, and I named it the thruster. And I thought of Artemis recently, but I named it the thruster because when I graphed this purple line here, it reminded me of a rocket ship taking off and then orbiting the Earth. Look at the coverage of this triangular loop. Yeah, it has a 42-degree maximum radiation angle or takeoff angle, and but that doesn't mean you don't have positive dBi radiation all the way down to 15, 17 degrees. Look at the gain in this antenna all the way out. So you can work, not only can you work some DX, but definitely continental, regional, and a lot of high angle radiation. This antenna is a lot of fun to use. It worked incredibly well for POTA. I was getting DX and I was getting regional contacts at the same time. It was a lot of fun to use. And you can work inside the skip zone, and I'll talk about that. Finally, the one that's coming out, the one that I've been using most recently, the half square, hammer half square. I'm going to call this the real DX antenna. This takes the Dominator and puts it on steroids, and you can see what happens. That's the brown line. The peak radiation angle is about 22 degrees, but look at all this positive dBi radiation all the way down to about 7, 8 degrees. If you're running positive dBi radiation down to 7, 8 degrees, you can work, if the conditions are right, almost anywhere in the world. Almost anywhere in the world. This is an amazing antenna with a lot of energy, a lot of concentrated energy. It's a full wave antenna with an open bottom, and I'll show you that one. But it gives you all this positive energy from 8 degrees all the way out to about 42 degrees. So you can, and I have, work global, continental, and regional. It's just amazing. Okay. All right. Those are the single element designs, and those kind of set the baseline. Let me quickly go through the double element or the multi-element, and I'll compare them to the PERformer with 90-degree radials. This is your reference antenna. All right, that's your PERformer quarter wave, one element, but I want to compare all the two element designs to that to kind of give you some perspective. Here's the Challenger parasitic array. As I mentioned, it's an off-center fed half wave, so you get some improved gain from minus 0.3 dBi to plus 1.2 dBi, and you drop your takeoff angle about a degree. And it's got some front to back, about 9 dB. But then let's get the PERformer parasitic array. That's where you take a second PERformer, you don't put any coax to it, but you use it as a reflector. And look what happens. You go from, here's your PERformer with 2 elevated radials at 90. Now you have your parasitic array, you drop your radiation, your takeoff angle to 22 degrees, and you get plus 2.4 dBi. Look at all that positive dBi radiation off the parasitic array. This antenna is going to be a staple during the waning solar cycle. You're going to need this extra energy to get on all the bands. All right, let's keep going. I had the parasitic antenna. Then I said, all right, what about a phased array? Now, a phased array, where you have to put coax to both antennas, offers you a tad more gain, but what it really gets you is front to back. Look at that, 24 dB front to back, and I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. But that's where the phased array is great, when you've got them about a fifth of a wavelength apart. Or if you use a phased array where you put them a half wavelength apart, you can get a lot more gain, plus 3.2 dBi, with still a lot of front to back, 19 dB. So if you're into really experimenting, parasitic is easy. Whoops, somebody unmuted. There you go. Parasitic gives you more gain, more forward gain with a little bit of front to back. But if you want to have a lot of crazy fun, do the phased array. You got to use electrical length coax, and I'll show you that in a bit. But you can get some amazing front to back and directivity with these kinds of antennas. And in this case, when you put them a half wavelength apart, it's bidirectional like a dipole. So it's much stronger than a dipole. Yep, they're just 2 quarter wave antennas, spaced about a half wavelength apart. It's pretty cool. The Dominator parasitic array is the one that I use most of the time now for all my DX. I go out and you can see quite easily with a 17-degree takeoff angle, 3.6 dBi average across all the bands, you're going to be working a lot of DX, positive dBi all the way down to about 6, 7 degrees. So this is my DX antenna, and it works extremely well. And I mentioned the new Marauder, the Moxon inspired antenna, and I'll show you that one a little bit. This one is rapidly, I just introduced it in February. It's the fastest, or I should say, the most downloaded antenna since February, because not only do you get this incredible energy down into the global DX region, and I know a lot of CW operators who use it for that, but you get tremendous energy, continental, regional, even a little bit into the skip zone. Look at this broad, positive DBI coverage of the Marauder antenna. It's fairly compact, and I'll show you how that's set up in a little bit as well. And then the final big one, the triangular loop, the thruster, where you put a parasitic reflector behind it. You can see you get this huge, huge positive DBI gain all the way out into the high 80s, but you also have some energy down below 10 degrees. So this one is going to be really cool. It's got a, even though the takeoff's at 32 degrees, you can see all this energy it has below it, as well as especially above that.
So,
Okay.
Greg, these charts are not showing the directionality of your antennas, are they?
No. Well, this is showing you the gain you get in its directional form. These are all the two element designs are not omnidirectional. They're either unidirectional or bidirectional. That's what the uni or the bi. By the way, this is all downloadable. It's one of my PDFs, so you don't have to memorize all of this. I know it's overwhelming when you first see it, but this is showing you the gain, Bruce, when you have it in its directional configuration. If that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and it makes sense too.
Yeah, yeah. And this shows you the front to back, again, in dB, because you're comparing forward gain versus radiation off the back side of it. Okay? Makes sense? All right. So now I'm going to show you some pretty pictures to kind of give you an idea of what all these antennas are, so you can decide if you're interested in building one of your own if you haven't already. And I'm just going to give you a tease, right? I'll go into a little bit of detail, but there's so many, I'm not going to spend 2 hours going through every single antenna. So I'll just give you a little high-level visual. This is the Performer. This is the 50,000 downloaded antenna all around the world, and I'm really proud of that. Radiation takeoff about 24 degrees, but you can see because of the capacitive coupling, your current is maximum at the feed point, and it's got a lot of current, especially in the first 2/3 of the radials. So you got to keep it off the ground, because think of your old capacitor equation you learned in science class, perhaps back in high school. Capacitance is inversely proportional to the distance between the plates. Capacitance is inversely proportional to the distance between the two plates of the capacitor. So if you assume a radial is one plate and the ground is the other, you want to minimize the capacitive coupling, because that steals potential radiated energy from your antenna. So you want to keep them raised. And I say, at the feed point, because that's your current maxima, that too, you want to keep off the ground about 4 to 5 feet, and keep the ends of the radials off about 36 inches, and you'll be fine. And since I introduced the antenna way back when, I found out that if you just insert these non-conductive nylon segments, the weed whacker string, in between the segments, you can stop the radial line at that point as far as the antenna is concerned. So if you want to operate on 20 meters, you take these out, you put them at the end. If you want to operate on, in this case, 15 meters, you take them off the ends and you put them between the 15 and the 17 meter segments. And the antenna just sees the first part of the radiator, and it doesn't see the rest of this. And this hanging copper out here doesn't affect the radiation at all. That's the Performer. When you put your radials at 90 degrees, this happens. This is the average across all the bands, about plus 0.4 dBi between the radials. At 180 degrees, about minus 0.5 dBi. And it gets down to 40 meters if you've got a nice coil for it. You can use any kind of coil. You can make your own. You can use a Sporty 40. I love the Chameleon M coil. Put that at the base. It's small and light, fits into my backpack. I love doing that. And if you're on 40 meters, you've got a pretty long radial. You can either have two 198-inch radials for 40 meters, or what I do, I just take this radial string and put it end to end. So you get, instead of two 40-meter radials, you get one 40-meter radial which is twice the 20 elevated, and that's fine. It works great for me on 40 meters. Makes sense? This is what the radiation pattern, according to the computer model, shows. You can see the side view is very effective when the radials are at 90 degrees. You can see the purple and the red is your peak radiation. You can see it peaking between the span of the radials here from the side, and I kind of dotted line the radial there, or from the top. You can see clearly all your purple intense radiation is between the span of the radials, and your front to back 3 dB is from here to there. Make sense? When you compare them, omnidirectional is the blue line. Red line is the 90 degree. You can see the difference. And the big difference between the two is you get all this extra energy for regional coverage. This is great for POTA, as well as above 60 degrees. I call near vertical incidence skywave above 60 degrees. You get all this extra radiation here. And these are the folks that were at one time using the Performer, even for some emergency communications. And they were getting some energy up here, but it wasn't quite enough to work some of the real locals. So that's why I came up with the next antenna, and I'll show you that in a moment, called the Performer NVIS. And again, just to remind you, this is the Performer at 180 degree radial versus the Performer at 90 degrees. You could see the difference. I always run it with 90 degrees, but I'm on the West Coast. If you're in the middle of the country, you want to go omnidirectional, you run it this way. Or you work the East Coast first and then turn around, work the West Coast when we all wake up. That's the way it works. So that's how they are compared there. In the field, incredibly low SWR, but most importantly, very, very broadbanded. You can see the entire 20-meter band is about 1.3 or 4 to 1 or lower. And incidentally, any SWR 1.5 to 1 or lower, please don't use a tuner. You don't need it. 1.5, even 1.6, 1.7. I know, we all have SDS, SWR derangement syndrome. Don't you have it? If you've got, I know, I figured Bruce would laugh at that one. If you've got 1.5, you're 96%, only 4% of your power is being reflected. That's way over the efficiency of most of these antennas out there, especially ground mounted. I see guys with ground mounted quarter waves who are losing 50 to 55% of their power into the ground because their feed point and their radials are laying on the ground, and they're sweating over a 1.1 SWR at 99.8%. Your antenna system structural efficiency is only 40, 45%. Don't sweat over this. 1.5 to 1 is fine. But it shows you in all cases you get low SWR and extremely broad bandwidth. Look at the 15-meter band. 1.2 to 1 or lower across the entire band. That's why this antenna is so popular. Now, I mentioned skip zone. This is really interesting, the Performer NVIS, and I never expected this benefit. Now, NVIS technically is for 10 megahertz and below. That means, in simple terms, when you send a signal up, it will reflect, or really more accurately, refract off the bottom of the F layer and come down at near the same angle. Okay, so when you have a low frequency, you can do that. That's why 30, 40, and 80 meters are great NVIS antennas. Now, what happens, though, when you go above 10 megahertz, or let's say 14 megahertz and above, 20-meter band to the 10-meter band, even 6-meter band? I don't call that NVIS per se, because what happens is at a higher frequency, as you get higher in frequency, this refraction angle becomes a little bit greater than the incident angle. So let's say you come up at 86 degrees here, call that a 4 degree off the 90 degree. You won't come down 4 degrees off the 90 degree. You may come down 15, 20, 25. But here's the benefit of high angle radiation at 20 meters to 6 meters. You can get inside the skip zone. And this is a really important concept that most hams don't think about. The skip zone, what is it? Well, you know ground wave, right? Ground wave on 40 meters, you can go up to about 80 miles away. Depends on the topography of the Earth. On 10 meters, the higher up in frequency, it's shorter, but you can go 5 to 10 miles. I mean, I've gone as far as 15 miles. but these are rough averages. That's ground wave. You're not using the ionosphere at all. You're just allowing the low angle radiation to hug the Earth and go out, and then eventually diminishes to nothing. But you can get out, like I said, up to 100 miles at lower frequencies. That's pretty cool. Now, when your higher angle, your peak takeoff angle, radiation angle, goes out, it will pop, it will refract off the bottom of the F layer, sometimes F2 layer, depending on the conditions, and also on the elevation of the ionosphere, because that changes every day. It's not the same. It will go off and it will fract off the bottom of that layer, and there's your first hop. Here's your first hop out there, and that could be up to 500 miles away, maybe even 1,000, depending on what antenna you're using. So, and then you can then work, because you have other elements of your antenna sending out at different angles. You can work inside these states that are 500 to 2,500 miles away. But what happens between ground wave and that first hop? That's called the skip zone. That's called the skip zone. And when you're on doing POTA, a lot of times stations within, let's say, 50 to or 100 to 500 miles away, that's like maybe a state or two over, and you want to talk to those people. Why not? It's a lot of fun. Well, that's where high angle radiation comes in, and that's what the Performer NVIS does. And this is what's really cool about this, Bruce, and I'm thinking about your coastal application, or any of you that have a lot of surrounding structures that you want to get over. This is the Performer antenna. Everything from here, the telescoping whip to the right, is your Performer antenna. Except there's a couple of differences. One is you can run both radials to one of the two elevation poles that you already have with your Performer. So think of this as one big fat radial. That's all you need on this omnidirectional high angle antenna. So you don't have to change anything. You can use your existing telescoping whip, mirror mount, choke, coax, whatever your mount is. Your same radials with the non-conducting segments, just like before, and one of the elevation poles, and you've got this half of your Performer NVIS. The other half, and that's the difference, you can still use then your other elevation pole out here, but then you construct this one wire. It's instead of being a linked radial wire, it's a linked radiator wire. So what I've done is I spec it so that all you have to do is run a 34-inch telescoping whip. And basically I use Chameleon as my reference, but that's the bottom section of about 22 inches. And then just extend one section up about 12 inches. And then you extend the radiator. Instead of up, you're now going almost at a sloping angle down here, and obviously the lower the band is, the longer the radiator has to be. So just like you do with the radials, moving that non-conducting segment, you can move that same non-conducting segment inside the radiator wire as well. So what happens? Here's your radials, and this is your radiator. And guess what's cool about this? Because I leave this one little portion of the telescoping whip variable, you can tune your radiator to get your best resonance on the band of operation you're on. So let's say you want to go on 20 meters, your non-conducting segment here is the end. If you want to go on 15 meters, you move it up here between the 15 and 17, and you do the same thing on the radials. And now you've got this high angle NVIS antenna for 15 meters. What's cool about this antenna? One is a high angle radiation. Two, it's a very low visibility profile of the antenna. It's only 34 inches high on the whip, and that's another 52. So roughly 80 inches, just a little more than 6-7 feet. I know a lot of HOA guys that leave this out permanently on their back patio because it's a very low visibility profile antenna. And because it's horizontally polarized, it's also got a very low noise profile as well. I ran this in my backyard with my Performer, regular Performer. I got an S5, S6 noise level in my backyard here on 20 meters in Silicon Valley. When I use this antenna, it's more like S1, S2 because it's horizontally polarized. And also, on windy days, it's got a very low wind profile. I mean, I don't want to be running my 25-foot whip on my Challenger with a 20-mile-an-hour wind gust. So I just put up my NVIS antenna. It doesn't blow over. It handles the wind extremely well. I can still work all the bands. I do get some high angle radiation into the skip zone, but I can also work DX on it. And I told you, I've worked Japan on 10 meters on this antenna because the radiation is pretty high. It uses the ground as a reflector. So again, it's very dependent on how good your ground is. But you can get up to 4 dBi gain depending on the band, and it will shoot off at a high angle, but it gets a lot of reflective surfaces, especially if you're going over an ocean. That's what I did to get Japan. It was really cool, very surprising, but I worked Japan on this antenna. And Bruce,
So,
this will get you over those mountains. Yes,
right.
Bruce, go ahead. I knew you were coming in, so go ahead.
So if I can kind of imagine that in a way looking like a short inverted V. When you look at it, the two sides are kind of similar lengths, right?
Sure.
If you were to extend the bottom pole up and shrink and eliminate the telescopic pole, basically you'd have an inverted V.
It's like or even a dipole, right?
Yeah.
Even a dipole, right? But the reason that I don't do that, I didn't do that for two reasons. One is I want it to be variable tuning. Once you cut a dipole or inverted V, it's stuck. And you can't really tune it, right? So I wanted to say, okay, if you already have a performer, you don't have to do anything other than just build this one wire. Everything else stays the same.
Yeah.
You just add this one wire off a short telescoping whip, and these are all fixed radial lengths and fixed radiator lengths to be tuned into the center of the band. So whether you do CW at the bottom of the band or digital or SSB at the high end of the band, you can tune for it with this short telescoping whip. That's why I did it this way. Otherwise, I'd say, just use a low to the ground dipole and you can get high angle radiation. But I prefer this setup.
Now, because it's multi-band, it must be is it off center fed technically?
Nope. No.
So how does it? Oh, you're adjusting the length by adjusting your little.
Yeah. Remember these movable non-conducting segments for the radiator as well as for the radial. So when you want to change bands, if you can use one radial if you want, but I like using two just for the heck of it. You got to move these, let's say between 15 and 17 for 15 meters, and you move that and you're done. You don't have to touch these poles. These poles stay right where they are. Yeah. And the antenna doesn't mind if you have this hanging copper on either side. It ignores it, according to the computer model. And I believe it because it works. And it can go all the way down to 40 meters. So now you can do 30 meters on this as well. 30 and 40 are NVIS bands. And I know guys now using this for their ECOM antenna, and they love it because then they can switch it easily to the performer just by taking this wire off and extending the whip. And so they can cover low angle. They can cover low angle with the performer or very high angle with that one extra wire on the telescoping whip. Make sense? I'm just giving you guys creative ideas, see, to get you inspired to think about this stuff. And what does it produce? And I know Bruce is not going to like this phrase, but I just based on what he said before, but it produces a big, beautiful bubble of radiation, a big, beautiful bubble of radiation. And you can see it. I figured, I know what your politics is. You can see this big, beautiful bubble, 86 degrees. You can see it from the side here. You can see there's your elevated wire radiator, and here's your elevated radials. You can see it there, and you can see it from the top. That purple is all that intense radiation going up at a high angle. And if it's 20 meters and above, it refracts and it gets you into the skip zone. You'll be working stations one state over that you haven't worked before. It's really, really cool. I even worked intrastate California with this antenna. It's kind of fun. For me, intrastate doesn't mean Southern California. It means working, let's say, Sacramento from San Jose, because we're both kind of in the extended Bay Area. It's really, really cool. It's a lot of fun to play with. It's just one more wire. You just add one more wire to it. And look at the positive dBi range from 50 degrees on up. You get all this high angle coverage, and it's really fun to play with. Now let's talk about the other extension of the performer. Instead of making it an NVIS, let's make it a parasitic array. And to kind of help you understand it, I have this computer model picture. And all it is your performer with 180 degree elevated radials. And then you just add a 2% longer performer with elevated radials, 2% longer, about a quarter wavelength apart behind it. And you can work, this shows you on the 20-meter band, but you can do it for all the bands, 40 meters all the way up to 6 meters. And of course, you have to keep changing the distance between the reflector and the radiator, depending on the band you're on. But it works incredibly well. Look at all this beautiful bubble now off to the side. A bubble of radiation. The purple is again the strongest. Off, here's your radiator, and here's your reflector. You can see it does exactly what you expect. And here it is from the top. You can see how you get this incredible energy. Front to side, meaning front to side here, is about 5.4 dBi, 5.4 dB. Off the side, you get 2.4 dBi gain here. Front to back, but 8.2 dB, meaning that there's 8 dB difference between the front and the rear. So that's pretty respectable. You can kind of alleviate some of the signals behind you. That's the parasitic array. It's just a piece of metal that's in the radiation field being used as a reflector. Make sense? Look at the positive dBi range, 2.4 dBi. It's very nice. And now let's take it one step further and take that parasitic array and call it a phased array. This is another antenna that you can build. In this case, the caveat is, well, the big benefit is you get a lot of front to back and more gain. But the caveat is you have to use electrical length coax, because now you're feeding both antennas with a signal via a T connector. So you can just take a little piece of coax from the back of your radio into a little simple little T connector, make it reasonable quality, and you got to have a multiple of a quarter wavelength of electrical wavelength, depending on the frequency and the velocity factor. I like to use 3/4 wavelength, and by doing that, you can have, if they're spaced a half wavelength apart, you get this high-powered dipole. In essence, high-powered dipole, except you don't have to put it a half wavelength above the ground. You can keep it just like a normal performer. Here's your two performers, a half wavelength apart. They're being fed by electrical length coax, and you get 3.2 dBi out the front and out the back. But your front to side is 19 dB, so you get a big. It alleviates a lot of the signals that are off to the side. And the beauty of this kind of an antenna is I show you in the PDF how to build a simple little switch box, which will rotate this 90 degrees. So you could be running, let's pretend this is east-west. You want to be running east-west here in the center of the country or either coast. Then all of a sudden you want to work Canada and South America. You flip a little switch and this whole thing rotates 90 degrees. Isn't that cool? You get the same benefit, 90 degrees. Or if you put them about a fifth wavelength apart and you use different length coax, and I explain all this, I won't go through it now, but I explained it in the PDF, you can get this huge bubble off a very low angle, about 2.6 dBi of gain. But look at the front to back. This is now unidirectional versus bidirectional. Front to back, 22 dB. Huge. So you basically shut off anyone behind you and any interfering signals or noise behind you. This becomes a very directional antenna. If you've got power lines over here, this is the antenna you want to use. Bruce is clearing his throat. He must have another question.
I do. So going back to the coax, I get that the electrical length, and all that. However, how sensitive is that to frequency? So if you change bands, if you go from 20 to 10, what's the impact? You're going to leave the same coax. You're not going to change coax.
No, you are going to change the coax.
Oh.
No, that's what I'm saying. This is meant for the real intense builders that typically have one or two bands they want to operate on. And fortunately, I cut a deal with ABR so you can get these at a 20% discount. I had to get something out of them. But basically, I have in my PDF, I show you the electrical length of the coax for the center of the band, which is fine for the entire band. But if you go from, let's say you want to run this on 20 meters and 15 meters, you'll need two different sets of coax. This is electrical length coax. That's the caveat with a phased array. Unlike a parasitic array, you can use the same coax.
Right.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Then I talk about the Challenger and the Dominator. I show them here on one chart. Basically, it's simple. You have a support structure. You have your 49 to 1 or 56 to 1 for the end fed or the 4 to 1 for the off-center fed. You just feed that to your telescoping whip. And in both cases, it's a 25-foot whip. Like I said, you can keep it because you don't have your current maxima is now about halfway up, a little less than halfway up your antenna. And so the current down here is far less. So you can be closer to the ground and you can then take your counterpoise and just droop it to the ground as well. It's okay to be on the ground, unlike the Quarterwave elevated. You got to have above the ground. And I picked some pretty basic Ununs. This is the LDG for about 30 bucks. This is the 10 antennas off of eBay for about 40 bucks. And you get a great antenna that way. If you're obsessed and you're an antenna geek like I am, and you want extra efficiency, I call this the Challenger Plus or the Dominator Plus. I show you how you can use the Palomar 4 to 1 for extra efficiency. In this, I used my back-to-back method with my Nano VNA, and I measured about 96.6%, very low insertion loss. Or the my antenna is 56 to 1 on the end-fed half-wave, and that's about 91.2% efficient versus end-fed half-wave antennas. Typical, and this is very typical, 10 antennas is a very quality 49 to 1 Unun, but 99% of the 49 to 1 Ununs out there are only about 80% efficient. When I say that, 20% insertion loss, 80% passes through. That's the best way to think of it. Whereas the LDGs, they're about 90%, so they kind of fit. Okay.
So I have a 64 to 1.
Okay.
Good.
Good.
And I don't know why I bought it. It was on Amazon and I just bought it, so and I've had a hard time finding a clear document that shows me when do you use one ratio over another under what type of antenna.
Yeah, Bruce, it's completely dependent on the design of the antenna. For example, when I use a 49 to 1, let's go with the Dominator, right? That's the end-fed half-wave. A 49 to 1 versus a 56 to 1. What happens? Well, if you remember your antenna theory, when you have a 49 to 1, you're about, what is that, 2,450 ohms of impedance. And if it's resonant, it's close to being purely resistive. But as you go up towards the further end of the antenna, your impedance goes up from 2,450 to about 2,800 ohms. So when you go further on down the radiator, in other words, this is going to get longer and your counterpoise is going to get shorter because what you're doing is you're moving your feed point down. Think of it as a dipole, except it's a vertical. You're moving it further on down the dipole, so you have greater impedance. So that's when you use a 56 to 1. Now, if you use a 64 to 1, you're even further on down the radiator line. You're probably somewhere down here. So you're going to have a taller telescoping whip and a shorter counterpoise. And in my PDF, I show you the difference between the counterpoise lengths versus a 49 to 1 versus a 56 to 1. They're obviously shorter with a 56 to 1 versus a 49 to 1 because you're further on down the half-wave line. Now, 64 would be even shorter. Longer whip, shorter counterpoise.
That would suggest that for an end-fed antenna, or especially an end-fed long wire, that a 64 to 1 might be better than a 49 to 1 or a 56 to 1.
It typically is built to be more efficient. Most 49 to 1s using a normal 140 by 43 toroid are about 80% efficient. And I'm calling it efficient because that just means the insertion loss is roughly 20%.
Right.
But typically, like the my antennas uses a big fat toroid on their 56 to 1. I'm assuming your 64 to 1 also uses a big fat toroid. If that's the case, you're going to have efficiency up here, and that's going to be a really good transformer or Unun, either one, interchangeable, to use on your end fed, whether it's a vertical or it's a sloper or it's a horizontal. You just feed in the antenna further on down because remember, your current maxima is in the middle and your voltage maxima is at the ends. As you move down your half wave, you remember impedance equals V over R. Your voltage is going up and your current is going down, so your impedance is going up. So the further you go down there, you take 64 times 50, whatever that is, and that's going to be roughly your impedance at that point in the half wave.
Yeah, it makes sense. I like that way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I got a picture on that, but I left it out because I have too many slides. This could go on forever. But that if you want more detail, I'm going to put it in my antennas primer, and I can show you how it works there. Okay, so those are the half wave antennas. You can see here's the Challenger on the left and the Dominator on the right. You can see they look basically the same. They're omnidirectional half wave antennas, except the Dominator has about an 18-degree takeoff. You can see it's got a little bit lower takeoff angle here. They're both omnidirectional versus 21 degrees on the Challenger. Okay. And here's a visual representation on that chart. You can see the Dominator plus 0.6 versus the Challenger minus 0.3. And the Challenger, again, not only does it have a low SWR, but I want you on all of these charts to look at the bandwidth of the SWR sweeps. These are all taken at parks, POTA parks. I didn't take them in my backyard. So they're relatively clear, but you'll notice not only is the SWR low, but most importantly, the bandwidth is huge. So I don't care if you're doing CW down here, digital over there, or sideband up there. You don't have to touch your antenna. You can use the same antenna adjustment no matter what mode you're using. And I build these antennas so they do have not only low SWR, but a very broad bandwidth. I try to design them that way. So that's a Challenger, and there's a Dominator, just 10 through 17 meters because you're limited by the 25-foot whip. If you want to get the alpha antenna 34, 35-foot whip, you can get 20 meters on the Dominator. It's just that you have to guy it. It's huge. I don't want anything that big. Let's talk about the Moxon. Let's talk about the most recent antenna that I put out. I call it the Marauder. But let's start with the history of the Moxon. I assume most of you have heard the term Moxon. You may not be familiar with it, but it came from this brilliant guy, British engineer back in the 80s called Les Moxon. He developed this antenna, which was inspired by an Australian ham 10 years before that called the VK2ABQ square. Moxon is easier to say, by Fred Canton in Australia. And basically, if you look at it, it comes in two variations, a tubing implementation, which is shown here, or a wire. A lot of hams like to build their own wire versions of it, and it's pretty cool. But what makes it interesting? Basically, Moxon and Fred came up with this concept of, think of this as a folded dipole. A folded dipole. So it's fed here. Here's your radiator. It's fed here in the middle. Here's your typical dipole. But to make it smaller, they fold the ends, and you're allowed to do that. It doesn't affect too much of the radiation or the gain. So folding it over just a little bit like that doesn't seem to affect it that much. This becomes your folded radiator, and then there's the same thing here on the wire antenna. And then if you look carefully, it's probably hard to see there on your screen, there's a little insulator here, a little insulator there, a little insulator here and there. And so basically the other portion, which is going to be a little bit longer, it's about roughly 5% longer, becomes your parasitic reflector. Parasitic reflector. So it's just another piece of metal, in this case, a certain distance behind your radiator, and that gives you extra gain and directivity. And you can do it whether you use tubes or you use wires. And I thought, I love this antenna. I love this antenna concept, but I don't want to put it up a half wavelength because you have to put it up a half wavelength to really get optimal performance. And it works really well when you do. Like a lot of guys put this on top of their house, but they're single band antennas, right? You got to build it for that one particular band. So a lot of guys use these on 10 meters or 15 meters. They get pretty big at that point. So Gregg, thought of, all right, now how can I turn this into a portable vertical Moxon antenna? Hence was born the Marauder. So let's take a look at the Marauder. And it's pretty clever, if I do say so myself, because you do use two telescoping whips. In this case, these are 17-foot whips. Most people have, I would dare say, access to two whips. You just support both whips, and let's take a closer look at the Marauder. So in this case, instead of feeding them in the center like a dipole, I feed them at the end, like an end-fed half-wave. It's still a half-wave antenna, but I wanted the feed point to be closer to the ground. I don't want to be climbing way up here to try to feed it because it gets pretty complicated. So I feed it here at the end, and the first telescoping whip plus this wire radiator up to this non-conducting segment becomes this basically inverted L radiator. Call it a folded end-fed half wave. Make sense? Then you have this non-conducting segment, so it doesn't see the rest of this. This becomes your parasitic reflector. And there's another non-conducting segment over here. Radiator here, folded end-fed half wave, reflected, folded half wave behind it. And they're separated by these two non-conducting segments. And because I use these Vago connectors, band link segments, it can run everywhere from 20 meters all the way up to 10 meters. And look at the average gain in this direction, radiation gain, 3.4 dBi gain in that forward direction with about a 15 dB front to back. That's why this antenna has become so popular recently, because a lot of guys want to get the DX, but as I'll show you in a second, you also get some pretty good continental and regional coverage as well. Here's the big bubble of radiation. You can see your gain averaging 3.4 dBi. There's your purple at 29 degrees, again, unidirectional, right? And here's your positive dBi range. This is why it's so popular. Here's your DX, all the way down to about 8 degrees to get into the DX zone, positive dBi radiation. You can still get DX with this radiation down here. I'm just showing you the positive, all the way out to 70. So you can get into that skip zone if you want, because you've got some components of radiation that are at higher angles between 60 and 65 degrees, all the way out to 70. It's really cool in that range. And of course, just like all the antennas, this was the only antenna I ever tested in the park that gave me, and it was, I didn't try to do this, it just happened, a perfect SWR on every frequency, only because you can tune it. Oh, incidentally, I'm going to go back to this. To make the radiator longer, you can see this telescoping whip is a little bit longer than that telescoping whip. That's how you tune it, right? It's roughly 3 to 5% longer depending on the band, but the way you make your reflector longer is this telescoping whip behind. It's just a little bit longer than that one. That's why I showed it this way. Okay, there's your Moxon antenna. Very low SWR, obviously, but again, look at the bandwidth, just amazing on all the bands. But again, you can tune it. You can tune it for CW digital, or you can tune it for sideband, because it's got a little bit narrower bandwidth than the other antennas. Again, because it's a parasitic array. With a parasitic array, you're going to have a little bit narrower bandwidth. Okay. Then to finish up on the future antennas, and then we can go into a general discussion or questions or whatever. This is the future antenna, the thruster triangle that I showed you before. Average of 2.6 dBi gain through the loop. Through the loop. So your gain is bidirectional through the loop, as you would expect. And to match a full wave antenna, you use a 4-to-1 balun. B with a balun, not unun, because it's a balanced antenna. It's a full wave antenna. It's a balanced antenna. So use a 4-to-1 balun. Again, you can use the LDG, about $30. You just feed this whip here. The the radiator continues on down this triangle. You use one of your performer elevation stakes, and it then continues along the bottom. So this becomes your full wave radiator. And just so these two wires don't get too close to each other, I just show you how to build this. I will show you how to build this little segment in here, just so it keeps these two wires from touching each other, because you don't want to do that. Okay. That's the thruster triangle. And again, here's from the back view, and here's from the top view. You can really see, here's the triangle coming out here and coming down there. You can see your bidirectional gain through the loop, the triangular loop. And I have a square version of this as well, in case you're interested. The thruster parasitic just takes the same concept, but it puts a parasitic triangular loop behind it, and you can push your gain up to close to 5 dBi, 31 degrees unidirectional with a very nice 13 dB front to back. And you can see it here from the top view. Again, through the loops. Okay. Again, the thruster, huge positive dBi range from about 18 degrees all the way on out past 90 degrees. The parasitic loop, that's where you put the loop behind it. Look at this, 4.5 dBi gain all the way down, positive dBi, all the way down to about 8 degrees. So I used this and it was working Spain with 5.7 to 5.9s from California. It was a lot of fun to use this antenna when the conditions were better than they are right now. Again, very low SWR. This antenna, because it's a full wave, happens to be very broad banded. You can see the entire 20-meter band, 1.2 to 1 or better. Same with the 15-meter band. It's just an exceptional antenna, easy to tune because you're just tuning the telescopic whip. I already figured out the other band link segments, the sloper part and the bottom part. All you have to do is just adjust the whip and get the right links, and you're all set to go. The final antenna, which I'm going to tease you with, is a hammer. This is the one that I've been using recently. You'll see it looks, basically it's the same concept. And a hammer, traditionally, is a quarter wave on one side, a half wave on top, and a quarter wave on the other side. Again, it's a full wave antenna, but it's not a closed loop. So therefore, you can't use a 4-to-1 balun, but you can use a 9-to-1 unknown. And I will show you how to do that in the PDF to get all the bands from 20 meters all the way down up to 10 meters with an average of 2.6 dBi gain. Again, bidirectional like a dipole through the loop. You just don't have to put it a half wavelength up like a dipole. You can have it down near the ground. And again, these are because you're using a 9-to-1 unknown, your current maxima isn't like a quarter wave. So you can have these just a couple of feet off the ground. It's fine to do that as well. So you can easily reach, just compress the telescopic whips a bit and put on the appropriate number of band link segments to work on the band you want. And I'll show you in the PDF how to tune the antenna. Basically, these two whips are the same lengths, and then this varies depending on what band you're in. Obviously, it's a half wave on top, quarter wave on the sides, roughly. Okay. You can see the model shows you the radiation. This is the top of the open, the top of the half square. You can see the radiation is bidirectional this way as well as that way, about 2.6 dBi. And a very nice positive dBi range, ideally for global and continental use. And that's what I've gotten. I skip over most of the country when I use this antenna, but that was by design. That's what I want to work. Again, very broad banded because it's a full wave antenna, very low SWR. You can just take a look at those for yourself. Okay, so that's the end of the antennas. I know that's a lot to throw at you, but I wanted to give you an idea so you have some kind of mental reflection. When you play the video back 2 or 3 times, if you're interested, you can get a scope of the antenna. These are really, really fun antennas to build. All of the antennas to build. But I do know, and I've gotten, dozens of emails over the years from people saying, I don't have the ability, the time, or the effort, or the garage or the tools to build these antennas. And so there was this really wonderful extra class ham in the Midwest who owns his own technology manufacturing company who says, I'll hand make these for people. And so if you ever are interested on buying one, he hand makes all these in his company. He does the Performer, the Challenger, the Dominator, even the Marauder crosswire set. And believe me, these crosswire sets take a lot of time. And so he builds those for you as well if you're interested. They're all handmade and they're very high quality. He's sold over 200 products and he's gotten all 5-star reviews, over 40 5-star reviews. Just amazing. And he also does accessories. He builds guy rope kits. He calls this the pole pod. So if you don't want to stick your Performer stakes into the ground, he's got this little plastic 3D printed plate, which you can just stick in your elevation poles to make it a triangle like a teepee and support it without having to stick them in the ground. He also produces his own high quality stainless steel 16-inch spikes. And we got a lot of requests for HOA camo. So if they want to wrap their Performer antennas or any antennas with camo, he sells these camouflage wrap kits, as well as a Performer already wrapped for you if that's what you want. Okay? And I mentioned ABR. You use my call sign, you get a 10 to 20% discount on those cables, even those electrical length cables on the phased array. They're really good company. They're based out of Houston, high quality stuff. Okay, so that's it. We just went through everything, believe it or not. And you survived the quarter wave antennas, the half wave antennas, and the future full wave antennas. And there's many more in my head that I'm thinking about as I go through the old ARRL antenna books. I just want to bring them up to date, make them easy for people to build out of their ham radio stuff box and deploy portable. And that makes a big difference. Again, if you want to be in my geeks list, send me an email, Gregg at KJ6ER.net. If you have a question on any of these antennas, if you're watching the video anytime or even live, send me an email and I'll answer it the following morning. I always keep these updated. These links stay the same. They're persistent links. But over time, as I get questions, I improve the PDF. It could be once a month. It could be once every couple of months. But the link stays the same. So every once in a while, download the newest version. I always show the revision date at the bottom of the PDF. Okay, you did it. You survived that long presentation. That's the end. I'm now going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Gregg. That was very informative. I'm sure everybody picked up on that and had some great questions, Bruce especially. Bruce, if you will get his email address, I'm sure you two can converse more about some of your specific
We could have
questions.
our own Zoom between you and I, Bruce.
Yeah.
I might be on your list already. I need to go double check.
Okay, you double check.
Neil?
Just an observation.
Yes, sir. Hi, Neil.
Gregg, it's a pity that you're not more enthusiastic.
Yeah.
I know. You know, the problem is I try to tone it down, Neil, believe it or not. I try to tone it down because I get too excited. And, you know, this is what you do when you retire, right? When you retire, I retired 3 years ago. You say, now I can do whatever I want. And I don't have to be paid for it anymore, right?
I got news for you. I've been retired 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have more things to do.
Yes.
I don't know where I find the time.
Exactly right. That's what my wife tells me all the time. She goes, you're too busy. You're busier now than when you were working. I don't know why that is. It's like gas expands to fill the space. And so that's what all of our fun activities.
Like a lot of us, we've sat through many presentations, but I have to say that is one of the best.
Oh, thank you.
Prepared, and it really was outstanding.
Thank you. Well, I finished my career in executive communications, helping really smart people simplify their slides and help them communicate effectively. So I put a lot of work into making the slides as visual as possible because I know what boring slides can be with just words and bullets. And so I tried to make them pretty.
Yeah. Well, it was excellent.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
Hey, Gregg, it was nice to hear the whole presentation as opposed to when you did it for our club. We had to put the noose on you there and cut you a little bit short.
I know. Which club was that, Brian?
That was one that Eric and I were on, and Udo was on as well. That was NS9RC in Chicago.
Oh yeah. Okay, I remember that one. Yeah. Well, you know, it depends. Like Bob told me, I can use as much time as I want, which is dangerous because I went on for an hour and a half. I could easily go on a little bit more, but I feel, you know, people are listening, so I got to keep it as succinct as possible. But many times I'm only given, 30 to 45 minutes. So I just give them the best tidbits and let them download the PDFs for more of the information. But all those Cartesian coordinate charts, that's a PDF by itself. So you can download that one and get them all for yourself if you're interested.
Well, we'll have it. It has been recorded, and David will have it up on YouTube tomorrow.
Great. Even when I had to help my plumber get the coupon, is that going to be on the video, on the recording as well?
Unless he cuts it out.
Tell him to cut it out. That's embarrassing.
I already made a note of the timestamp to get it ready.
Thank you. You're a good man.
And I'm going to use the coupon myself. So
it was $150 off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Gregg, I just wanted to mention we're in each
Yes,
other's logbook several times. I've gotten quite a few woohoos coast to coast from you.
Woohoo!
Oh yeah. And also, when I first started Build a Performer, I looked at it and I'm very impatient, so I just wanted to go out there and do it. So instead of making the segmented radials, I just made ones that were long, the length of 20 meters.
Yes, a lot of people do that.
And did 20 meters, which I typically just do anyhow for POTA.
Yeah.
And
you can always segment it for like your other favorite band, like 15 meters if you like that. A lot of guys just cut it for 20 and 15 and that's it. You can do whatever you want. That's the beauty of it. It's your antenna. It's homebrew. So enjoy it. Make it personal.
Well, I bought a spool of 22 gauge wire off of Marketplace for I have 7,000 feet of it, so I have plenty
Wow.
to
Wow.
experiment with.
That's more than I have.
40
Greg,
bucks.
ask him how many POTA contacts he has.
How many POTA contacts do you have?
I'm almost to 60,000.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Okay, I'm only a little ahead of you then. At 80 some odd thousand.
Yeah, and I'm up 800 and some activations. So,
Okay. Wow, you're as crazy as I am, aren't you?
well,
Hey, Bob.
just goes to
Hey,
show
hey,
you
Bob.
we have no life. So,
Well, yeah. Well, kind
no,
of. It's a fun life.
no, I enjoy doing it, and it's
Yeah.
funny. I have what I call my fan club. You're
Yeah.
basically 10 people that
The hunters, the
yeah,
same hunters.
and we have a good time.
Yeah.
But thank
What
you
am I
for the
looking at
presentation.
here?
Appreciate it.
What picture? Who put up that picture?
I did.
Oh, of course you did, Bruce.
That's my 30-foot
Wow.
fiberglass pole.
Wow, look at that thing. And that's you put your wire antennas up there, huh?
Yeah, that's an end fed, and one of those is just a guy.
Gotcha. It's fiberglass?
It's an electrician's pole. They use it for turning switches on and off,
Good.
right?
Yeah.
And
Good.
They have to decommission them after a while. They're not allowed to use them forever.
Oh.
And I was camping one day a couple of years ago, and some guy was watching me, string one up, and he goes, "Well, would higher be better?" And I said, "Sure." And so he went back and he brought this to me and gave it to me.
I love it, man. That is so cool. Yeah. I know guys that have put wire only Dominators and Challengers up a telescoping pole. And it works really well. You just make everything out of wire instead of telescoping whip. And you can put the feed point, wire it up down below and then extend the pole so your feed point's up about 20, 30 feet.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. You'll have fun with it. You'll have lots of fun with it.
It's interesting that the league is now selling a 10-meter Moxon.
I saw that. Yeah. Make it. Well, I tell you, one of the reasons I think, when I talked to QST magazine, the editors, and the reason that I won one of the awards, not the first place, but the second place award, is he said, we're trying to encourage more people to homebrew their own antennas. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're coming up with a very elegant, simple design that most people can build themselves. And so that was part of the reason we wanted to promote the Performer antenna as well. And so they're doing the same thing with the Moxon. They did the same thing with the NFED Halfwave. I think they're even showing you how to build your own ununs as well. And chokes. I think it's great. We need to do more of that. We need to get more home brewers out there, especially with antennas. But if you're interested in those Moxons, go vertical and try the Marauder. It's a wonderful antenna. There's already plenty of videos on YouTube of guys using it, talking about it, which really pleasantly surprised me. Yeah, go ahead. I heard another question.
Oh, I was just saying goodbye. I got to hop, guys.
Oh, yeah, 3:00 my time. Okay.
1, 2.
We'll
See you all,
Brian.
fellas. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Greg. Another fabulous presentation. Thank you again so
Thank you very much, Greg.
My pleasure. Check out my email list. Go for it, fellas. You'll love it.
Look for Bruce.
Okay. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Yes, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.